Welcome to the Candle Business Coach Podcast, a show about the craft of candle making and small business. I'm your host, Kirsty Allen, and I'm a candle maker, mum of three, and kindness advocator. Join me as I dive into all things candles and small business and deliver advice and tips to you in episodes every Tuesday and Friday. Are you on the list to get my daily motivation emails? Every day I'll send you a message that is designed to help keep you focused on taking action toward your goals. Sign up using the link in the show notes. This episode is brought to you by my free ebook, The Candle Business Marketing Kickstarter Kit. Inside this free ebook, you'll learn to identify your blocks of time to dedicate to your candle business. Plus, there are several tips and tricks for re-engaging past customers and attracting new customers into your business so you can grow your business and reach your goals. Check out the link in the show notes for your copy. Welcome back to the podcast, my friend. I hope you're having a lovely week and looking forward to another episode of the Candle Business Coach podcast. If you're new to the podcast and this is the first episode that you're listening to, then welcome. It is so lovely to have you here. As you would have heard in the intro, I'm Kirsty Allen and I'm the host of the Candle Business Coach podcast. So if you have previously listened to some of the podcast episodes, particularly episode number 16, you'll know in that episode I talked through 8 common candle business questions that I receive as the candle business coach. So in this episode, I thought I would flip it over to the candle making side and answer some common candle making questions, 8 of them in fact. So as the candle business coach, I'm asked all sorts of questions relating to building a candle business, but also making candles as well. So as I said, I wanted this episode to be more focused on the candle making side of things. So let's get started with the first question. What type of wax should I use for candle making? This depends on a variety of factors. Each different wax has different characteristics and different pros and cons. And the choice of wax that you choose depends on your preferences, the type of candles that you want to make, and what you want the candles to look like when you finish making them. For example, there are some types of wax that you can make as pillar candles that have a crystal look on the outside, whereas there are other waxes that you can use to pour into a candle vessel or a jar. So some of the waxes, or some of the more common waxes, are paraffin wax, soy wax, coconut soy, and beeswax. So I want to talk through all of these, but there are other waxes out there, so it pays to do your research and also get in touch with a supplier to find out which wax is best suited for the type of candle that you're wanting to make. So paraffin wax is one of the most widely used waxes for candle making. It's affordable, readily available, and offers a good scent through, and you can add colour to this wax as well to make coloured candles. You can use this wax to make a variety of candle types, including pillar candles, votives, and container or jar candles. Paraffin wax doesn't have the best health perspective if you're looking for a more environmentally friendly wax. So that leads me into soy and coconut soy wax. So soy wax is a natural alternative to paraffin wax, and it's actually made from soybean oil. It's gained popularity due to its renewable and eco-friendly nature, and it has a clean burn, excellent scent throw, and is suitable for container candles. Whereas coconut soy wax is a blend of both coconut and soy waxes. It has a creamy texture, and no, it doesn't smell like coconut. It provides an excellent scent throw as well, and you can use these in container candles. They have a clean burn and a great adhesion to the insides of containers. And then lastly, beeswax. So beeswax is a natural wax produced by bees, of course. It has a delightful honey-like scent and a warm natural colour. However, beeswax can be more expensive compared to other waxes. So that's just an example of some of the common waxes that you can find at your local supplier. But again, it depends on what you're looking for in your finished candle, such as burn time, scent throw, the aesthetics, and the environmental considerations. So make sure you do your research, and if you have any questions, speak to your local supplier. Question number 2 is, how can I prevent my candles from tunneling or creating an uneven burn? So there's a few steps and considerations that you need to take on board. Number one is to trim the wick. So before lighting a candle, whether it's the first burn or subsequent, you want to make sure you're trimming the wick to about 5 or 6 millimeters, which is about 1/4 of an inch in length. When you have a longer wick, that can lead to a larger flame and cause uneven burning. You also want that first burn to create a full melt pool. So what that means is when the top of the candle starts to liquefy, you want that liquid wax to reach the full edge of the candle, so from edge to edge, so that it creates or sets the memory of the candle. For every subsequent burn, you want to have that full melt pool. If you don't allow it to have the full melt pool, it will start to tunnel, and that means every other time you try and burn that candle, it will only burn until it reaches the same diameter. So the initial burn is crucial as it helps to prevent tunneling in subsequent burns. In the same vein, you want to burn for an appropriate amount of time. So when you're lighting your candle, make sure that you allow enough time for it to melt the entire top layer of wax before extinguishing the flame. This again will help create more of an even burn and prevent that tunneling. And you want to aim for about 3 to 4 hours, but that depends on the size of the candle. So as a general guideline, candles should be burned for 1 hour for every inch, which is 2.5 centimeters in diameter. For example, a 3-inch diameter candle should be burned for at least 3 hours. You also want to avoid drafts. So drafts or any wind or any air movement can cause uneven burning and lead to tunneling. So make sure you place your candles in a location where there is minimal air movement to ensure a steady and even burn. And you also want to make sure that the wick has been positioned in the center. So before lighting the candle, ensure that the wick is centered in the container. And this also means that when you're making your candle, you want to make sure that you're centering the wick during the production process. There's a product that I recommend called Quick Wick, and I will leave a link in the show notes to that wick centering tool. I actually had Myrna, the creator of Quick Wick, on the podcast in a previous episode, and I recommend listening to that episode as well because it helps to explain how Myrna came up with the idea, and she's just an incredible woman, so love it a bit. Definitely check out that episode. So another tip to help prevent tunneling or creating that uneven burn is to use a candle snuffer or a wick dipper instead of blowing out the flame. So when you use your breath to blow out the flame, that can cause smoke and disturb the wax, and that can lead to uneven burning as well. And you also want to, or lastly rather, you want to avoid burning your candles for too long. So while it's important to achieve that full melt pool, avoid burning a candle for more than 4 hours at a time. If you burn a candle for more than 4 hours, that can lead to excessive heat and may cause the candle to overheat and result in uneven melting. Question number 3 that I've asked as the candle business coach relating to candle making is, what are the different types of candle wicks and how can I choose the right one? So just when it comes to choosing the type of wax that you want to use when making your candles, when you choose the candle wick, that also comes down to a variety of factors depending on what sort of candle you're wanting to create, what sort of aesthetic, and how you want the candle to perform. So one of the most common candle wicks that you can purchase from your local supplier or online are the cotton wicks. So these are made from braided cotton fibers and they come in different sizes and are suitable for different types of candles. They provide a steady and consistent flame and are ideal for most candle applications. So whether that's pillar candles or votive candles or tea light candles or jar candles. There are also wooden wicks and they provide a beautiful aesthetic and some even provide a crackling sound which is reminiscent of a fireplace. So you can buy crackling wooden wicks which are just beautiful. They're made of a natural wood and are usually used in container candles. They can have a larger flame and create a larger melt pool, so they work well with soy wax and other natural waxes like coconut soy. So there's a few factors you want to consider when choosing the right wick for your candle. One of those is the candle size. So the diameter and height of your candle will help determine the appropriate wick size. Larger candles require thicker wicks or multiple wicks to ensure an even burn. The wax type you use is dependent on which candle wick you use in your candle. So some wick manufacturers provide guidelines, but you can always speak to the candle supplier where you purchased your wicks from and wax from to determine the best choice of wick for the wax that you're using. You also want to look at the desired burn time. So if you want a candle to burn faster or slower, certain wicks are designed to do that. So make sure you consider that when you are choosing your wick. And the desired flame size as well. So as I said before, the wooden wicks perform differently to the cotton wicks. So it really comes down to your end product and what you're looking for, and then working backwards from there. Question number 4 is, how do I calculate the right amount of fragrance oil to use in my candles? So there's a few different ways, a few different equations to work out how much fragrance oil to use in your candles, depending on a few different things, of course. So we want to determine the wax weight of the vessel that you're using. We also want to determine how much fragrance oil percentage we want to use, and that can be anywhere between 6 and 12%, depending on the manufacturer's suggestions for both the wax and particularly the fragrance oil. And then we can actually calculate our equation based off that. So depending on what sort of end result you want, whether you want a strong hot throw or a strong cold throw, or whether you're wanting more of a subtle scent through the candle, will depend on how much fragrance you use, but it also depends on the strength of the fragrance oil. So there's an app that I recommend called Candle Pal, just the word candle, P-A-L, Candle Pal, and that will help you determine how much fragrance oil to use in your candles, whether you're making one candle or a batch of candles. So definitely recommend downloading that app, and that will guide you through how to choose how much fragrance oil percentage to use for your candles. I will also add, it's really important to keep a record of what you're creating and to maintain those records for your fragrance oil percentage and the final results when you're doing your testing. There's a book I recommend called The Perfected Chandler. You can purchase it online. Just Google The Perfected Chandler, and it will guide you through the testing phase in terms of all the different aspects you need to know to make sure that you're tracking and checking the testing process throughout the candle making journey, which is really important. When you start your candle business, there are so many things to consider and research along the way, especially when it comes to choosing the right suppliers. Long Story Short provides all your design and printing needs, from your logo and branding to designing and printing your product labels. The quality is exceptional, the customer service is amazing, and prices are very reasonable. They are the only label company I recommend, so check out their website or send them an email today to get started. hello@longstoryshortdesign.com.au. Question number 5, what are the best methods for melting wax safely? So there's a couple of ways you can do it depending on what stage of the candle making journey you're at. If you're at the very beginning and you've just purchased a candle making kit, congratulations, very exciting that you're starting your journey, but most likely you'll be using the double boiler method, and this uses indirect heat to melt the wax. So what you need to do is place a heat resistant container, such as a Pyrex dish, with wax inside a larger pot filled with water. So just to say that again, you've got a pot of water and then you've got a heat resistance container inside the larger pot. The pot has the water and the heat-resistant container has the wax, so the water and the wax do not mix. Then you can heat the water gently, and as it boils, the steam will gradually melt the wax in the Pyrex dish, for example. This method helps prevent direct heat exposure to the wax and reduces the risk of overheating. Another method you can use to melt wax safely is using an electric wax warmer. You can buy these from many suppliers online. So what you would do is you would put the wax inside the wax warmer or wax melter and turn it on. And because it's got a controlled temperature setting, you'll then ensure that you don't overheat the wax and burn the wax. And then you can put in as much wax as the wax melter will hold, and then you can batch make or make bigger productions of candles, which will save you time overall. A few guidelines that I wanted to run past as well, just to make sure you're being safe at all times. Make sure you're using a heat-resistant container designed specifically for melting wax. Avoid overheating the wax as it can become flammable or produce fumes. Never leave melting wax unattended, especially when using direct heat methods. Work in a well-ventilated area to avoid inhaling fumes. Keep a fire extinguisher nearby, especially when using an open flame heat source. Use protective gear like oven mitts or heat-resistant gloves to handle hot containers, and make sure you're following any specific instructions provided by the wax manufacturer. Always, always, always exercise caution and prioritize your safety when melting wax to minimize the risk of accidents or injuries. Question number 6 is, how long should I let my candles cure before selling or using them? So the curing time for candles can vary depending on several factors, including the type of wax used, the fragrance oil that you've added, and the size of the candles. But as a general rule or a general guideline, most candles benefit from a curing period of at least 1 to 2 weeks. Now, I know when you've made a candle, it can feel like a really long time having to wait 1 to 2 weeks before burning it to test to see whether you've used the right amount of fragrance oil and the wax has performed properly as you've melted it and poured it. So there's a few things you need to be sure of, and that's one of the reasons why we need to wait those 1 to 2 weeks. During the curing process, the candle's fragrance and wax blend together, or they bind together, and that allows for a better scent throw when the candle is burned. Additionally, curing helps to ensure that the wax sets properly, and this can again reduce the risk of tunneling or uneven burning, which we talked about before. And also, it's important to note that soy wax candles or coconut soy blend candles, wax candles, typically require a longer curing time compared to paraffin wax candles. And that's because soy wax has a more complex molecular structure and it's a softer wax. So it takes longer for the wax to firm up and allow the fragrance oil to bind with the wax properly. So as much as it is quite challenging at times to wait those 1 to 2 weeks or 10 to 14 days, for example, it's always best to check again with the supplier and go off their recommendations based off the wax you've used, the fragrance, and the wick that you're using as well. Question number 7, how do I prevent air bubbles from forming in my candles? This is a really great question and a common issue that many candle makers experience when they're burning their candles or when the candles are starting to set. You'll notice little air bubbles or little air pockets on the top of the candle wax, and that can be really disheartening if you feel like you've done everything right to make the candle. There's always a few different tweaks that you can perform to ensure that those air bubbles don't become an issue for you from here on. So there's a few things that you can try. So I'll run through some of these suggestions. Number 1, you can warm up the container or the vessel. So preheating the vessel or jar that you will be using to pour the wax is a really great way to ensure that the temperature difference between the melted wax and the container is minimized. And this will also minimize the chances of those air bubbles forming. Once the candle has set and you've noticed that the top layer has those air bubbles, you can use a heat gun. I wouldn't recommend a hairdryer only because the airflow that comes out of a hairdryer is much stronger than a heat gun and you can risk blowing the wax out of the candle. So use a heat gun, a dedicated heat gun for melting that top layer of wax, which will then release any of those trapped air bubbles by raising the temperature of the wax slightly and allowing those bubbles to escape. The next tip is to tap the container gently on your table or your surface. So after you've used the heat gun to melt that top layer of wax, you just want to tap that candle jar gently on top of the table to help release any more of those remaining air bubbles that might have risen to the surface, or help to encourage those air bubbles to rise to the surface. Another really, really great tip is to pour the wax slowly. So when you pour the melted wax into containers, you want to do it slowly and in a controlled manner. This minimizes the disturbance of the wax and reduces the chances of those air bubbles being trapped in the first place. So by following those tips, you can minimize the formation of air bubbles in your candles and also create smooth, bubble-free surfaces. And the last question I wanted to talk through today is, what are some popular candle scents or fragrance combinations? The answer to this question is pretty much, how long is a piece of string? There are hundreds and hundreds of different candle scents, and I know that it can be quite overwhelming when trying to decide what candle scents or fragrances you want to offer in your product range. And you can go with the tried and true, such as vanilla, lavender, coconut and lime, sandalwood, rose. There are so many different types, but my advice is always to go back to your target audience. What does your niche, what does your target market want to purchase from you. And that could mean asking your customers what they would love to see. But if you're at the very beginning of your candle journey and you don't have customers yet, you want to do some market research and see what popular fragrances are popular depending on where you are located in the world, what sort of candles you're making, and what your target market like as well. It's always good to have something from the different scent families, and that includes citrus or fruity, floral, sweet, woody, and masculine. So there are a few different categories of scent options that you can base your candle fragrance choices off, but it's always important to think about what your target market or your target audience or your ideal customer is looking for in a candle, because there are so many different combinations that you can make and create. So there you go. Those are the top 8 questions that I've been asked lately as the candle business coach when it comes to candle making. I hope that that's given you some clarity and some direction as to how to troubleshoot some issues, but also how to avoid those issues to begin with. So thank you so much for listening, and I will catch you in the next episode. Thanks everyone for listening today. I hope this episode added value to your candle making journey. Check out the show notes for all the links mentioned throughout today's show, and please subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. Thanks again for listening. Have a beautiful day.